All right, everyone, let's give one big round of applause for our Crown Forces fife and drum doing wonderful work for us in place and design. One more round of applause, folks. They've done wonderful. Obviously, it goes without saying that without the help of our volunteers coming out here every year, events like this would not be able to happen, so we always appreciate it. And of course, you'll see many other volunteers coming out to the field right now because you folks just so happen to be at the final battle of our siege weekend, the 37th annual for those keeping count. A garrison of under 200 British soldiers against a force of nearly 4,000 and capitulate quickly. Once the Americans take command of the site, they then move north along the river. Their next main objective is Fort George near Niagara-on-the-Lake, capture the entirety of the river, but along the way the British don't make it easy for them, fighting two major battles at Chippewa, just north of us, about 15 kilometers, and then later at the Battle of Lundy's Lane. These battles would be incredibly bloody and would also give the British a newfound respect for their American adversary, showing that they could stand up to seasoned British musket and cannon fire on open ground. Once these bloody battles had been finished on July 5th and 25th of 1814, both armies found themselves with a lack of momentum. The American army falling back to Fort Erie to be followed by the British by the beginning of August. This left both armies in a predicament. The Americans holed up inside their fortifications, the British intending to take them or to hold the British here. This led to over 6 weeks of continued fighting, which on August 15th of 1814 led to the destruction of a section of the fort when a powder magazine exploded underneath surging British forces during a night assault. This, though, while this was one of the high points of the siege, was not the end. General Drummond was still very much concerned with taking control of Fort Erie and attempting to drive the U.S. Army back across the river, and planned to do so. To do this, he built more and more entrenchments and gun positions just north of the fort. The first of them before the night assault at 1,200 yards, the second at 800 in late August of 1814. Now, at this point, both sides were running into serious logistical issues. Particularly, the British themselves had underestimated or overestimated the amount of artillery ammunition powder they would have available. This put something of a time pressure on them to take the fort quickly. And this also accelerated much of the fighting you saw over those last few weeks. Much of that fighting wasn't done in large formations on open ground or in assaults against the walls. Instead, it was done by small groups, units, and contingents skirmishing with each other in the glens, openings, and heavily thicketed woods outside the fort and gun positions. Now, of course, while you're also enjoying the reenactment we have out here, I'd also like to point your attention to some of the strapping young lads and lasses that we have running up and down the safety lines we've established. Those are my co-workers. They're carrying buckets, and we would very much appreciate it if you folks helped to support the fort. It's been a rough few years here at Old Fort Erie, and we always like to put on events like this, but that's of our enthusiastic public. So any money you have available, please feel free to flag them down and let them know that you would like to donate. We always appreciate it.
No, he's saying they're firing down.
Now, with the construction of those gun batteries the British were building, Battery 2 proved to be less than ideal for what Drummond had hoped. So instead, by the beginning of September, a third gun battery comes under construction, and this one puts pressure on the Americans. Within 400 yards of the falls, with a view of the entire half-mile-long line of American defenses, the American garrison realizes that something needs to be done. And with General Jacob Brown, after convalescing from a wound for the past month, returning to command, he, in aggressive style, decides to attack the works. First, with a small engagement on the 4th of September, which is what we're seeing here. These American soldiers approached Battery 3, taking the outer works and spending the better part of 2 hours fighting the British in and around that gun battery. This did not get the effect they were hoping, unfortunately. While they were able to make initial forward progress, as one American officer later put it, they realized that their opponents outnumbered them and were receiving reinforcements. So as the fighting drew to a close and to avoid a more serious engagement, they gave, as he said, 2 more volleys, retreated with a cheer for victory.
That way.
Yeah.
What is supposed to continue that way?
I think they'll come back this way.
I hope so.
You guys take the horde over?
Yeah.
I think what they're doing is just regrouping.
And just so you folks know, although the battle will be moving back and forth, it is moving to the other side of the field. If you'd like to be a bit more mobile, for the next few minutes, down at the other side, farther south, will be the better view of the firing. We can also see here, along with our pretty normal redcoats out in the field, that we have some men in green coats that you may not recognize as British. However, these are absolutely allied with Crown forces and are members of the Glengarry Light Infantry. The Glengarrys were raised by the province of Upper Canada, now Ontario, for defense just before the war began, and saw service all over Upper Canada, Lower Canada, and Vermont and New York State. These men were also decisive in the fighting around Fort Erie, spending much of their time in the woods, harassing with American light infantry. Also were the men who attacked and freed Battery 1 and pushed down towards Battery 2 during the British counterattack. And we can see here alongside them the main brigade of British Redcoats is making their way out onto the field. Their main target was Battery 3 itself, evacuate American forces from their most effective defensive works. Now, while they're fighting this battle on an open field today, and they're fighting in nice clean line formations, this is not how the second sortie would have played out in the thick woods surrounding these gun batteries. In fact, according to many of the officers who were there on the day, there was no way to organize men on such a large scale in nice, clean lines. Instead, much of the fighting turned into a confusing morass of small units led by junior officers, making progress where they could and often acting independently. This made it very difficult for both sides to evaluate exactly how the battle was proceeding as it went on. This was not unusual for the time period. You can even see as we're firing these muskets and cannons just how much smoke was produced by the guns. This was a serious consideration, and is why so many of our soldiers here are dressed ornately in red and blue jackets to identify themselves to their friends, even in situations like this. After 2.5 hours of fighting, ending with possibly one of the most violent events of the siege singularly, as the second gun battery was approached by a company's worth of British infantry, they cornered their American counterparts battery, and realizing they had no room to fight back, offered them to surrender. According to one British officer who witnessed the surrender of Battery 2, the commanding American officer did give orders to lay down arms, and his men began to comply reply until one man leveled his musket and shot the British commanding officer square in the chest, killing him instantly. This led to what John McClure would later recount as a savage butchering as British soldiers fixed bayonets and moved into the gun battery, killing seemingly every American soldier occupying it.
Fire.
Oh, there was that guy. Yeah, guys.
As American forces eventually retired, having completed their objectives, the battle ended in quite a lot of carnage. We can already see bodies piling up on the field. By the end of the day, both the British and American forces had suffered roughly 500 casualties, all told, many of them being lost in the underbrush of the thick woods, never to be properly identified. With this done, however, the siege began to come to an end. The British had saved their gun batteries but lost the powder in many of their guns and were already beginning to pack up. The American forces believed that they had driven the British off after they left on the 21st of September, not knowing that the British had already made plans to do the same. This, of course, then left the fort in American hands, and it would stay as such until early November of 1814.
Are they being very theatrical? Yeah.
He backstepped.
I like the scout.
As we can see here now, British forces have pursued the Americans back towards the fort, as they did historically, before realizing they had come within range of American guns along the walls and began to take cannonball shot, at which point they too decided that the engagement had come to an end and began to pull back to their lines. We can also see coming up behind them the fife and drum corps. You might be surprised to see musicians out on the field along the fighting, but they were absolutely necessary.
Is that you?
You can see now that the American commander is offering a ceasefire and a parley.
I see your next position. Alright, let's start. People die. Kids, stop.
Right when they move, I'm gonna...
Now, of course, meetings of officers like this were quite common at the time. After any major battle, prisoners were taken and had to be exchanged. Find those exchanges happening either regularly on the field or from prisons behind the lines. Hopefully, we won't have to deal with too much of that today, though. Now, everyone, we are, of course, here on an actual battlefield. As the reenactors do so, I would ask everyone to doff their caps for a moment of silence. Everyone, a round of applause for our volunteers, and particularly for the Crown Forces Pipe and Drum yet again. While we're all basking in the glow of the great work our volunteers have been doing, I would also like to thank some of our sponsors, who again, much like you folks out here, have made all of this possible. First of all, of course, we have Turkstra Lumber. They were the ones who provided the wood for the siege ladders our brave British volunteers used to scale the walls last night, proving once and for all that if you build it, they will come. Secondly, we also have the mill. The mill provided the peat moss and mulch that we used for the explosions in the demi-bastion that our brave British volunteers ran into, making quite a pair. We'd also like to thank Halco Portables, again providing the porta potties that our volunteers have been using this week. It's very clear that, of course, if you need get up and go, you need to get up and go sometimes. So we are very thankful for them. And, of course, McDonald's as well for helping to provide breakfast. If there is one thing more uncomfortable than sleeping in a tent covered in wool, it's doing it without breakfast. So we'd like to thank all of them for making all of this possible. If any of you folks were looking to cross the field, I would like to ask you to wait just a little while longer. We'll have our ceremony, give out the awards, and then we'll make sure that the field is clear of gunpowder, just in case anything might happen. We will give you the signal if you're looking to cross. If not, the entire site is open to you for the rest of the day, and I do hope you folks enjoy yourselves. Thank you very much.
So this is the center.